All right, Bob, why don't you go ahead and you can start.
All right, thank you, Courtney. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. Appreciate you dropping by to participate in our Zoom chat with myself today. Courtney will be helping moderate today's Zoom chat. So if you do have questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and Courtney will pass those along to me when we get to the Q&A portion. So I have just a few slides to share tonight. Tonight, the primary topic is going to be talking about a draft, and I say draft reopening stages plan. Nothing's been finalized, but I do want to take the time to walk through this and cover just a couple of other items that I think are important for our community to know, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A. Okay. Ah, there we go. Sorry, it was, again, having a little trouble here with the computer. Just a reminder that we do have our fall reopening plan can be found on our website, and there's the link on that slide. So if you do go to our web page, there's a nice, what I call button on the front page that you just click and it'll take you right to the reopening plan. So this is the main focus that I do want to talk about tonight. As many of you probably are aware, we have been working with the Whitman County Department of Health and the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction almost on a daily basis. With the Department of Health, we meet at least weekly, if not more. So we've been talking about looking at the state guidance and metrics and looking at our specific community. When I say specific community, I mean Whitman County and Pullman. And so with that, we've been working on taking a look at a reopening plan that is built in stages. So what I call this is a slow reopening plan. Part of that is to help our students and our staff safely reintegrate in person to school. So again, this is a draft. This will be something I'll be sharing with the school board next week. So some of this could change. I want to point out that we're working on our plan, and the metrics that we are using are not metrics calculated by the Whitman County Department of Health, but metrics that have been suggested to help us navigate the number of cases in determining when it would be appropriate to bring back certain ages of students. So obviously in stage number one, that's where we are right now. We have been serving some students in person on a limited basis. As COVID cases begin to trend down and stabilize, and we're looking at on the first stage 2 of cases between 63 and 83, bringing back preschool through first grade. We have started preschool, so we're really focusing now on K1. So the plan would be to bring back kindergarten, first grade students in person on some type of AB schedule that has not been determined yet. We have sent a survey out last night to our kindergarten and first grade parents, basically asking if their students would return if we offered in school, and who would prefer to remain online so that we can offer both. So 2nd through 12th grade students would still participate on district learning. The idea behind this is that with K1 back, we'd go at least 2 weeks before we would bring in 2nd and 3rd. And the reason for that is to make sure that the cases of COVID have stabilized or continue to decrease. If that is the case and we see cases drop between 42 and 62, we look at bringing back grades 2, 3. We would run that again, take a look at that for 2 weeks. If cases drop to 21 to 41, we would bring back 4th to 5th grade. We'd run 2 weeks. And if cases drop to 7 to 20 cases, we're looking at then bringing back 6 through 12 on an A-B schedule. A-B schedule, particularly in the secondary level is going to be critical because of the 6-foot distancing. Right now, until we get to stage 6, when that would be 100% in learning with also looking at reduction of the 6-foot spacing, we would be able to accommodate students again and get back to a typical year. So we are looking at starting this as soon as it's safe to implement. And I appreciate all the work that's gone into the stages of reopening plan. We've been working with our staff. We've been working with the health department. This is a good start, but again, it is a draft. I do want to let you know when we do plan and when we have students in person, we are following all the state guidelines. We are wearing masks. We are physically distancing. We are washing our hands on a regular basis. And those things have helped us to be able to continue to provide services to students currently and in the future. So we're very excited about continuing this opportunity to start bringing our students back. No date has been set. A lot of this is going to depend on how the cases of COVID continue to develop in our community, and hopefully that number is going to be going down. I'm going to run on to the next slide here. Just some general information. An online only option will be made available for families. This will be a semester or year-long commitment to minimize disruptions and ensure that we have staffing. The online only option may result in change of a student's current classroom teacher, so they may end up with another classroom teacher. The slow start again involves bringing back smaller groups of students for a few days each week, and that will allow us to teach the safety routines before the whole class attends together. The phasing again will begin with a K1 on an alternating schedule of some type. Again, that's with guidance from public health officials to transition slowly, utilizing our ample opportunities to carefully train and acclimate students to safety protocols in small groups. Teachers will be focusing on transitioning and training students in the classroom during those alternating schedules as part of that phase-in process. Just some general information, what will be required of students and families. Again, there will be a daily wellness screener. So students or parents will need to complete that before attending school. It will be through Skyward. It's a 2-question survey basically, or questionnaire. Masks are going to be required for all students or staff. There are some medical exemptions, and we do have face shields available for students or staff. There'll be opportunities throughout the day or the time that students are there in school to take a break from wearing the mask, and that is outlined in our reopening plan. Students will be physically distanced and be required to maintain those distancing practices. And time will be provided for students to wash their hands several times throughout the day during transition activities in particular. Transportation will be provided for students, but the district will be encouraging families to take their child to and from school, or if appropriate, students to walk or bike if possible. That will really help with our physical distancing practices. More information on what the school days will look like for students can be found on our district reopening plan, and we will be updating that, as well as information posted on our FAQ on our website. Again, if I know one of the concerns that parents might have are what happens if there is a potential or confirmed case. So we do have protocols in place that will respond to cases of COVID reported. They'll be reported to the district Department of Health and district health staff here in our district. It includes contact tracing by a trained team from the Whitman County Department of Professionals, notification to any individual that may have had a potential exposure will be notified. Notifications, communications will occur in partnership with Whitman County Department of Health, and there will be the requirement for privacy. So we will not be releasing names. The Whitman County Department doesn't release names, they just release aid ranges. What we will release is just a letter saying there was a confirmed case or at a particular school. Transparency and privacy will be recognized. Individuals who are determined to have potential close contact will be notified. And staff and students who are working in and attending a school building will be notified. I do want to go over quickly just some new guidelines that came out on October 6th from the governor's office and Washington Department of Health regarding education-based sports and activity. The new general as well as sports-specific return to play guidelines will replace the previous guidelines that were tied to the governor's Safe Start plan. And those guidelines must be followed per the governor's office. County benchmarks will be used to determine what sports and activities are recommended to take place based on COVID activity. And to view the most recent guidance, you can click on the link below, or you can find that information on our district website under news. And I believe that is the last slide that I wanted to show, but I will move back to this particular slide. So at this time, I'm happy to take questions. So again, Courtney will moderate those questions. Thank you.
All right, Bob, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. The first question is 63 to 83 per week or per 2 weeks. Maybe just a little clarification on, is that 63 to 83 cases a week or over a 2-week period?
That's a week.
Okay. What is the rationale for starting with K and first?
The rationale for starting with K and first is giving the information that we've been provided by health professionals. Students in the age range from K to 5 to 5th grade do not seem to have a greater chance of catching COVID or spreading the COVID virus.
What happens if cases increase instead of decrease?
That's a great question. So if we were in stage 2, where we had kindergarten first and the cases were increasing, we would still continue to provide in-person services through K1 on whatever schedule we have in place, but we would not add 2nd or 3rd grade until those cases stopped increasing and started to decrease down to the numbers indicated in the metrics.
Can you provide the rationale for going with metrics that differ from the state recommendations?
Yeah, we took a look at the state is based on 100,000, and then looking at Whitman County, which maybe is between 40 and 50,000. If you look at these numbers, they're a little more conservative than the state's number, but again, taking a cautious and slow approach to reopening.
So that kind of goes into this next question of why did the cases number change for younger grades? The state initially had said 75 cases per 100,000 in population.
Yeah, and 75 is a looking at the state's model, 75 to 100, which means we're in high COVID activity. But if you're at 74, um, that's kind of an interesting number to use. So we're trying to find some middle ground in looking at some numbers that would provide a little more flexibility.
If cases go beyond 83, will they go back to distance learning?
No, we will stay where we're at. We'll basically freeze at whatever stage we're at, unless there's a recommendation or an order from the governor's office or Department of Health to go back.
And Bob, do you happen to know the current case per week count?
I don't know the current. I have not had a chance to look at this week's count thus far, but I'm imagining that we're still in phase 1. I will say that I did get a piece of information for the month of September. There were 134 tests involving children aged 0 to 17. And out of those 134 tests, only 1 was positive. That was during the month of September.
Will the 2-week period be a rolling period?
So the 2-week period would be bringing kids in on an A-B schedule. And we would maintain that until it was safely determined, or we had had space that we could bring all students back on a full day schedule.
And Bob, can you provide more clarity around the protocol in the case of a potential or confirmed case of COVID in school? Just so, as far as the steps that will be taken when someone tests positive.
Sure. So if a student tests positive, because we have seating charts, because we're going to be cohorting those students, then those we would notify the health department. Most likely the health department's going to notify us because of the testing. So then they would indicate a positive test. We would take a look at our seating chart, who is in the closest proximity. That would start that contact tracing. And then those students would be, parents would be contacted, suggested probably for testing or at least quarantining. Same thing would happen if a teacher tested or was suspected. Then as long as they were not around any of the students for more than 15 minutes within a 6 feet, there would be no reason to quarantine that classroom. If there are multiple cases, we would contact the health department. If there are multiple cases in one class, we would contact the health department, and most likely that class would have to quarantine if it was 2 or more students.
What if we send our kindergartner to school, cases then go way back up and we don't feel comfortable with them at school? What options do families have?
That's a great option. Then we would take a look to see if we could then find some space in one of our online classrooms.
Will classrooms still be limited to 10 people at a time?
No, classrooms would not be limited to 10 people at a time. So classrooms, the way that it is set up by the guidance from the health department is that you have to maintain that 6-foot distance. So in a typical classroom, we could have 22 students approximately. But in K1, most likely we'll have less than that. And most likely we'll only have half a class in at a time in person for at least a while before we see how the numbers play out as COVID cases, and then recommend going to the entire class together in a class.
If a student shows up to school and their parent has failed to fill out the daily screener, what would happen in that?
So that's a great question. So the plan is that we will run a report at 8 a.m. Any parents that have not completed or students have not completed that attestation, as those students arrive at school, they will be checked by one of our staff members. So we'll do a temperature check, questions with the students. If they pass that attestation, they'll go to class. If not, we will call home.
Is the 6-foot distancing a state requirement? Some kindergartners are attending daycare to complete their kindergarten work. They have to wear masks, but they don't have to maintain 6 feet of distance. Why is it okay at a daycare, but not in kindergarten?
That's a great question. Daycare and public schools have different requirements, and I don't know the reason why there's a difference between preschool and kindergarten, but we are required to maintain that 6-foot distance in a school setting.
If numbers allowed in social distance could be kept, would it be possible for kids to attend 5 days a week?
We won't have that in the beginning, but that's our ultimate goal, to get back to 5 days a week as soon as we safely can.
During in-person classes, are there any travel restrictions for students or families?
No, we do not have any travel restrictions. With that said, we would rely on the Whitman County Department of Health for information if there were any changes to travel restrictions. But currently, last time I checked, there were no travel restrictions, and we don't enforce those at this particular time.
What about fresh air? How will it be guaranteed that air is filtered as recently recommended by the CDC after confirming the airborne characteristic of the virus?
So we have plans to, obviously we have windows that can be open. We also have our HVAC systems can be set to bring in air. Each of our classrooms have their own filtering system. So, and also we will be having opportunities as weather permits for students to go outside.
Can parents request for family groups to be on the same AB schedule, also differing schedules?
That'll be one of the things that we'll take into consideration. A lot of that's going to depend on who will be returning in person versus who will be starting on distance learning.
Can you maybe provide more clarity around starting with K1 instead of bringing back 4th and 5th grade?
Sure. So the recommendation, this is very similar to what's happening in most districts that are starting to bring students back. They are recommending that, especially in areas of high COVID cases, that we start with the youngest students first, that are less susceptible to experiencing symptoms from COVID and possibly passing along COVID.
What is the justification that students potentially will have to change teachers if we choose to stay online? You have stated you would follow state guidelines, but the 63 to 83 cases is not a state given number.
So with our staff, there may be some staff that are not able to come and teach in person. So those staff would be teaching the online classes.
The last part of that question is why is the student needing to adapt when the district is not following their previously stated goal of following the state numbers?
These numbers are very similar to the state numbers. And these numbers were also reviewed by the Whitman County Department of Health. And this allows for slowly, remember the state numbers are recommendation numbers as far as phases. But these again are a little bit more conservative, but not much.
Can the current case count numbers be viewed by parents?
The current case numbers are posted on the Whitman County Department of Health website. I don't know if I completely understand that question, but.
Once it is determined to open up to each level, what is the timeline in notifying families?
So we're hoping to provide at least a 2-week timeline before opening.
The 63 to 83 cases per week is per 100,000 people, or is it just that number regarding the population, or sorry, regardless of population?
Regardless of the population. It's more based on closer to 50,000.
When do you anticipate bringing K1 back? Do we have any idea where we stand now with cases and forecasting?
It's a great question. We are working with the Whitman County Department of Health, and there is a trend where the COVID cases are going down, and I think that's a long-range trend. And if that continues, and I don't know when that will be, but they may come out with a recommendation. We want to make sure that we're ready to be able to adapt to that recommendation as quickly as possible and as safely as possible.
And it looks like there was a share about the question regarding Whitman County cases. There's a link in the chat to view the number of cases in our county. What is the protocol if a staff or student gets sick or has suspected COVID during the day?
Great question. So if we have a staff member or student who shows symptoms of COVID, they will be checked by one of our school nurses and isolated until their parent can come pick them up, take them home.
There, it looks like someone has a neighbor who has children currently attending school, and they have started, and it is impossible to stay socially distanced and wear masks at all times for students. How can we be guaranteed this won't happen if it is already happening?
Well, our students are doing a very good job of maintaining their masks on for students that we have. I can't guarantee that the mask doesn't slip down. Sometimes when I'm wearing mine, it slips down, I need to put it back up. But there will also be opportunities for them to go outside where they will not have to wear a mask, but they will be socially distancing to the greatest extent possible.
Is there a plan for substitutes when teachers get sick?
Yes, we are working on a plan to also train our substitutes so they can train in person or if needed to go online.
So it looks, Bob, there's some concern mostly about just not having numbers that line up with the state. One comment is if we're going against recommendations of the state or changing the numbers to better fit Whitman County, if my child gets sick, what is the district's liability?
That's a great question. And so that is, remember, this is a draft. And if people feel more comfortable going with the state recommended numbers, that's definitely something we can look at.
The attestation states if something is not normal for you, if someone normally has a cough and sore throat for allergies or common to get random fevers, how can you guarantee it's not COVID and just normal?
There's no way to guarantee it's not just normal unless there was a test.
Previously in a community meeting, you stated that MERV 8 filters are used in the buildings, but it's recommended minimum MERV 13. But recommended MERV 17 or a HEPA filter. We are going into cold weather. How can we filter for COVID while keeping windows open when the cold comes in the next week or two?
Well, one of the things that we are taking a look at is the MERV 13s. That's something that we've put in an order, I believe. There are backlogged on those. However, each individual system classroom is filtering its own. So it's not the whole building filtering in, it's filtering just that classroom. And from our understanding with the research and with the health department, that is allowable for students to return and staff to return into a building.
Locker space in the hallways is limited. How will the storage of items in the cold weather items be addressed?
So we're going to do that by classroom basis because right now, we won't be doing lockers. So we imagine that, for example, coats will be put on chair backs, or we will have another arrangement in each individual classroom.
Whitman County Health released a notice stating a school in Whitman County has an outbreak of at least 5 COVID cases. Is that a Pullman School District school? And if so, would you release that info to parents?
Could you read that again, Courtney, please?
Whitman County Health released a notice stating a school in Whitman County has an outbreak of at least 5 COVID cases. Is that a Pullman School District school? And if so, would you release that info to parents?
Oh, that is not a Pullman school district school. We haven't had 5 cases. What we are taking a look at developing, it's similar to school districts up north that have been serving students, is posting that on our website if there was a confirmed case and what school that was.
Does the district insurance company need to approve our recommendation or the recommendation?
This would be something we would run by our insurance company, but our insurance company has been looking at our reopening plan, and this would be something that I would definitely run by our insurance company as well.
If a child is quarantined, will they stay with the same teacher or be reassigned to a new teacher conducting class virtually for 2 weeks?
Read that. Can you read that one again, Courtney?
If a child is quarantined, will they stay with the same teacher or be reassigned to a new teacher conducting class virtually for those 2 weeks?
That's a great question. So that's one of the things that we are working on right now, with probably staying with their current teacher, and we would do assignments home-based.
I mean, maybe, Bob, what might be a great idea is if we could put a link on our website that links to Whitman County where families can find the weekly count of cases. So we can make a note of that.
Yeah, we can make a note of that.
Someone would like to know what your personal opinion is on reopening schools and bringing the students back.
So my personal opinion, I would love to have all of our students back, but I want to make sure that as we bring it back, we do it in a safe manner. I think it's important for our students to have at least some in-person education and ability to socialize, but we want to do that in a safe manner. So, and definitely looking at the age range, I think preparing for at least K-5 at this particular time is warranted unless things change dramatically. And as long as it's being supported by the Department of Health, I think that is reasonable.
Will there be requirements for mask types? There are some districts that are banning certain types of masks.
Yeah, that is something that we'll be continuing to discuss with our lead nurse as well, taking a look. I know the neck gaiter type are probably the least effective. So we'll be taking a look at making sure we have masks that are at least recommended.
And this next question, Bob, has a few parts to it, so I'll give you the first part.
Great.
How will it work at the secondary level if a teacher is unable to teach in person? Will there be enough to cover specialized subject classes in person?
That's a great question, and at this point, we don't have an answer to that right now.
Will students be switching classes or teachers in the secondary level when we go in person?
It'll be on an A-B, some type of A-B schedule. We've taken a look at this summer during the planning. It's really, really difficult to move teachers. So in the secondary level, it would be students moving class to class, but in a cohorted group as much as possible.
Will the students attend class in person with a virtual teacher on a screen?
No, it'll be an actual teacher in the classroom with the students in person.
The plan for switching to hybrid at the high school, is there a plan yet?
There is a plan, and we're continuing to work on that plan. That'll be the last phase in, given the age of the students.
When will families know more about the online only option?
I'm hoping that at least for K1, we'll know in a couple weeks.
There's a note on here, the COVID-19 page of the Whitman County website. If you scroll to the bottom for weekday press releases, that will tell you the daily COVID-19 counts,
Yep.
as well as a few other resources to share. So some of the concern of going back is the impact to students and their emotional well-being. What is Pullman School District able to do to help kids who may be doing fine academically, but are emotionally exhausted and having it manifested outside the classroom? This is hard on everyone, but young children are unable to cope the same way older youth and adults are.
Yeah, that's a huge concern for us right now. We will be starting a social emotional screener, if that's not already started. When we have that information with all students, our counselors are working on how we can continue to support our students as well with their social emotional well-being. So that's a huge piece that we want to make sure we address.
And Bob, do you happen to know how many students are currently being served in schools?
Approximately 207 students last time I checked.
And do you know what that staff to student ratio looks like?
It's not a ratio because it's across the district. So if you total all students, all grade levels.
Which staff are currently working in person with students? Are any of them being placed in high or extreme risk scenarios?
We have mostly our special services staff and our English language learner staff are working with students. We do have a couple classrooms that might be considered more at high risk.
What kind of feedback have you received from teachers regarding transitioning to face-to-face instruction for K-1 students?
So we've met, we're meeting every Tuesday and Thursday. We've had our third meeting. Our staff K-1 teachers are doing a great job in providing feedback, asking questions regarding this restages and slowly opening. We are discussing what the AB type of schedule might look like. And so it's been great conversations, great thinking, and some great problem solving that's occurring.
If families have more than one kid, can they wait to go in person until both grade levels are hybrid?
That's a great question. I believe we can make that happen, so we can take a look at that.
And it looks like that was the final question in the chat. Does anyone have any lingering? Oh, here we go. Do you anticipate virtual and in-person instruction will be equivalent?
That is a great question. I think that really depends on the individual student. We try to make it as equivalent as possible, but some students thrive on distance learning and some students thrive more in person. We are trying to provide as equitable an opportunity for each.
At this moment, with the current hospitalization rate, those numbers are a lot higher than what CDC and the state recommends. What is the rationale to go only with a case count as the metric to decide reopening?
That will not be the only metric to decide reopening. And I believe it's, up on the top square, it says transition to the next level will be in consultation with the Whitman County Department of Health. We're also going to look at that. We're just not going to straight look at metrics, but we also want to be working closely with the Department of Health to make sure any transition is done in a safe manner and is recommended.
With WSU going virtual in the spring, will this impact PSD's decisions or no?
Right now, that is just another piece of information we're taking into consideration. Knowing that they're going online may be helpful as far as a possible trend of COVID continuing to decrease in our community. That's a possibility.
And that was the final question. Oh, here we go. Will availability of the cure for COVID have an effect on schools reopening faster?
That's a great question. I don't think that would impede us in any way of opening faster, but I think that may be a ways out from what my understanding from talking with medical professionals. I think that's a ways off.
Can you walk through the numbers again, Bob? Washington State is saying 75 cumulative cases per 100,000 over 2 weeks, saying 63 to 83 cases per 50,000 over 1 week scales to 126 to 166 per 100,000 over 2 weeks. So that kind of comes out to be double the number of cases versus the state recommendation. Can you dive into that a little bit more?
Yeah, sorry about that. So again, taking a look at those numbers, it probably should say per week should just be over a 2 week period and not per week. I think that's what is confusing people, and that I apologize for.
How will COVID symptoms concerns differ during the flu season?
Say that one more time, Courtney.
Sorry, how will COVID symptoms concerns differ during the flu season?
It's a real concern that we have, because if you look at the symptoms, they're almost identical. And so that is one of the things that we're really going to try to work with our health department and our nursing staff to try to figure out the best possible means of separating those two. But that is something that we are concerned about going into the flu season. That said, if we are using our PPE gear and our physical distancing, hand washing, hopefully the cases of flu will be lower as well.
So just to clarify one more time, Bob, the 63 to 83 cases is over a 2 week period, correct?
Yeah, that would have to be over a 2 week period now that I'm taking a look at it.
So they're struggling with the choice of having to go online only and not have the option to go back to in person once cases are in line with the state.
Yeah, and part of that is going to be really taking a look at the possibility exists of returning in person, but it's going to depend on space availability.
And Bob, won't the parent attestation help with the flu season?
It should. In theory, that should help. I mean, if you're experiencing flu symptoms, we wouldn't want students to come to school with flu symptoms or COVID symptoms. And if they had a fever, we don't want to be sending a student to school.
Can the flu vaccinations be required similar to other vaccinations?
That's a great question, and I would have to defer to the health experts for that answer.
Can families change from in-person to online at any moment?
It would depend on space availability.
Shifting from being in the hybrid model to the distance learning model?
Correct.
And how were the numbers determined?
Again, the numbers were determined in a conversation with the Whitman County Department of Health. We're trying to look at trying to take it, breaking down what the state had and making it into smaller groups rather than these large groups of 75 or over, or 25 to 75. That's a huge range in the numbers. So again, I'll be talking with Whitman County Department of Health on the numbers as well, seeing if we can get something that makes a little more sense. And the way it's worded, I can see that's difficult for our to understand. So I'll take a look at adjusting those.
Are we expecting the hybrid model to go through the school year once kids are back in person?
I hope not, but there's no guarantee.
All right, any other lingering questions? That was the final question so far, Bob.
Well, I do appreciate everyone's time tonight, and I appreciate the questions. I do wish I had more answers, but as you know, COVID is this pandemic has been very fluid, and things change rapidly, guidance changes. So we're continuing to do our best, and we do want to get our students back in as soon as it's safe to do so in person, and we will continue to strive to do our best.
All right, well, thank you all for joining. And this will be posted to our website. So if you hear from anyone that they missed it tonight, we'll get it posted to our website as soon as possible.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Bob, do you mind ending your screen share?
Yes, I will.